Socratinians! I have officially been in London for 6 months. I can't quite believe it. I still have my Kiwi accent, contrary to the April Fool's joke you may or may not have seen a few days ago. I'm still loving it here. It is great, and if you want to hear more updates, I would highly recommend you follow me on socials, Socratina, Facebook, Instagram. I don't use Twitter or X anymore. May again one day, but not right now. And I am also hoping to revamp my Patreon. So if you have any ideas of what sort of perks you would like to see on my Patreon, please let me know in the comments. I am trying to make these vlogs a monthly thing. Not quite working out because I am so busy, but I thought this month I would talk about quite a personal topic to me, which is being expressive and confident on stage as a neurospicy bean. In this, I don't really want to call it a video essay, I'm going to talk about where is the line between my disability has disabled me and making excuses. I will also talk about where is the line between making compromises with the neurotypical world and just unnecessarily masking, if that makes sense. I will talk about authenticity, what is it, and how much energy goes into masking and into things that are not masking, and how to allocate that energy. Spoiler alert, I don't know how to allocate that energy, and what things work and what things don't when it comes to being expressive on stage. I know that some people find it really easy, it comes really naturally to some people, including neurodivergent people, but to others it does not come quite so naturally, and I am one of those people. Firstly, the excuse thing. I find it really hard to know when I'm actually saying, like, no, my disability has disabled me, I actually am struggling right now, and the opposite end, which is like using my own impairments as an excuse. Pardon me. I ate cheese and now my throat is all full of googly wooblies. You didn't need to know that. Anyway, I don't see disability as a dirty word personally. It depends who you ask though. Different people are comfortable with different terms, and that's okay. But I'm okay with the term disability. I personally find feelings quite hard to deal with. I know everyone kind of does, but I've always found them really hard to understand. Like, I have very high empathy, sometimes high to the point of it being like actually really hard to cope with, but it took me a really long time to learn how to utilize my own empathy in a way that wasn't harmful. For example, I often, as a kid, I would lash out, and it got quite bad. That's another video entirely. But now as an adult, I kind of know better ways of coping with when someone else's feelings feel like my own feelings. But still, I find it very hard to differentiate what I'm feeling sometimes, and I find it hard to express it sometimes. It can just be really confusing. Also, my face does not always show emotion in a way that a neurotypical person's face might show emotion. For example, sometimes I just appear to be blank. And to be honest, I don't really know exactly what my face does, but I know that it doesn't quite do the sort of the the thing that the majority of faces do most of the time. And I also personally, I struggle with eye contact. I find eye contact quite uncomfortable, so I will often not actually look directly at people when I'm talking, or my eyes will flicker all over the place, and that is why on stage I find eye line quite hard, because I don't always stare at things when I'm focusing on a thought. My eyes just flicker all over the place, and it looks very scatterbrained, which I suppose not entirely wrong. I also have slower reactions, I guess. My brain and body don't always want to talk to each other. That is a dyspraxia thing I've recently found out. Probably also an autism thing, but it's a thing anyway. And so that's why when people say acting is reacting, yes, it is true, but I react differently from how most people would react to a thought or a feeling. So often that will be misread as my acting being bad. And of course, because of all these things, making my acting convincing just takes a lot more effort. A lot of autistic people say that they feel like they have to put in way more effort than neurotypical people do, and I don't know, could be true, could be imagined, not sure, but I have an inkling that it is true. That is kind of where my disability, if you like that word, comes into play. The second thing I was going to talk about, the whole compromise thing. I feel like if you are neurodivergent, you kind of spend your life making compromises with the neurotypical sphere. It's kind of inevitable, impossible to avoid, really, unless you're a hermit. But I am not a hermit, so I am glad that I have done drama and acting and things throughout my life, because I feel like it has helped me become more confident socially. It, in a way, this sounds awful, but it has helped me assimilate with the neurotypical world. It has been an advantage, I'm not going to lie, because it's sort of a good way into a world that I have felt quite isolated from. And eventually my fake confidence became real confidence, and that did actually help me. It has also helped me develop empathy for people who I initially didn't really get. So it helped me just understand neurotypical logic better. Neurotypical logic is not necessarily a terrible thing, it's just different from my logic, and that's okay. So it helped me just empathize with other people, and to do things like letting the other person talk, showing interest in the other person, all things that make other people feel valued and feel good. And I'm glad I did learn those social skills. I think they've been helpful for both me and other people. But it also feels like a lot of the acting skills that I have learnt in drama classes and things like that are basically just learning how to pretend to be neurotypical, which, not gonna lie, doesn't really sit well with me, because I'm just not neurotypical, that's just a fact. And also, who says every single character that I play on stage has to be neurotypical? Obviously, characters are going to be a whole range of neurotypes, because people are a whole range of neurotypes. I don't necessarily only want to play neurodivergent characters. I want to be able to play a variety, but I don't want to only play neurotypical characters either. Thankfully, the world is becoming a lot more neurodivergent friendly. It has changed so much since I was in high school. It's incredible, and I love it for that. But there's also, where do you draw the line between a healthy compromise and an unhealthy compromise that is what I'm still trying to get my head around. Number 3, authenticity. So acting is fake. That is why it's called acting. And naturalism, pretending to be natural, is very hard on cue for everyone, regardless of their neurotype. And I find it really hard, needless to say. And for that reason, things like method acting and Camp emotional method and various other techniques are very helpful for a lot of people to get that naturalistic acting going on, by kind of actually feeling the feeling or actually making themselves feel the feeling on stage. I'm personally still figuring out what I find helpful and what I don't, but I have found Camp emotional method very helpful in the past and would love to look more into it, actually, because that has apparently been used specifically for people on the autism spectrum. The other thing about authenticity is people say just be yourself, but I am not sure who I am, especially behind the mask. I do not know who I am because I've spent so many years masking, just for my own safety, really. The earliest knowledge that I have of myself being authentic and just doing, like, existing and going with what felt good would be like before I started primary school. But even then, like, I had issues and I still have a lot of trauma from early primary school. So that's another video entirely, which I'm not entirely sure if I want to make, but if you want to see it on Patreon, let me know. And sometimes on stage I can be almost too authentic, because sometimes I act very over enthusiastic and over the top because I am a child of the 2000s and I listened to all the shouty, wavy army vloggers of the time, and I kind of picked up a lot of their mannerisms. But at the same time, I'm not really an over-the-top person. I sometimes make my acting look too naturalistic and too understated, because I tend to do a lot of things in quite an understated way. And I think a lot of that is kind of partly just me being an introvert, and also partly Kiwi culture. New Zealanders don't really like to be too over the top. We have tall poppy syndrome. We like to fly under the radar, and we don't like to be pretentious or fake. And so a lot of that comes into my acting, and often it looks like I'm underacting or not acting at all. Again, where is the line? And also energy. Acting is exhausting. I put a lot of energy into masking as it is, and being anxious and overthinking and worrying about what people think of me, and all of those things. It takes a lot of energy just figuring out how to live, how to adult. And so for that reason, entering performance mode is very hard for me in rehearsal, especially because I feel like I'm always kind of in performance mode anyway. Often in rehearsal, like, I'll be trying to save my spoons for when I actually have to perform, and I'll be often thinking about technique and words and musicality, and thinking about acting at the same time is very, very hard. And when it comes to saving my spoons, if you don't know what spoon theory is, look it up. It is quite useful. But when it comes to saving my own spoons, again, sometimes I don't realise that I'm out of spoons until it's too late, and I'll just have like a full-on meltdown. And that also is very, very draining, especially in a new country, new school, new everything. I've been very, very fatigued ever since I moved here, so I'm having to be quite careful with that sort of thing. And of course, feeling emotion in real life is exhausting. my own feelings are very intense. I do not feel things by halves, and I've spent most of my life kind of keeping my feelings to myself because I've often been told off for crying over little things and getting too angry, too emotional, sometimes even too excited, which I think is quite a common experience for autistic people. There's that double exhaustion of feeling too much and hiding my feelings too much. And so yeah, I used to throw the most amazing tantrums. It was great. But I've kind of lost the ability to do that as an adult, and that's probably why I like all the stereotypical shouty, whiny emo music, in case you couldn't tell from my bangs, because it throws the tantrum for me, and I would love to learn how to throw tantrums again. That would be amazing. The other thing I find really exhausting is focusing. Because I recently discovered that I do in fact have ADHD, or at least characteristics thereof. So that's probably why my eyes flicker all the time, because my thoughts are always just going bing, 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 and so my eyes are tracking those thoughts, as opposed to me just focusing on one thing, unless I'm hyper focusing, which I do that a lot. That is the thing. But yeah, just focusing on the thoughts I'm supposed to be thinking when I'm acting is really, really, really hard. So what works for me, for other people? What works? Emotional mapping. I think that is Stanislavski. Please correct me if I'm wrong. It's been a while since high school drama. But Stanislavski, emotional mapping, writing your thoughts for each bit of a song or a monologue, that is supposed to work quite well for things like eye line and just getting the right emotion at the right time. But it is kind of harder in practice than in theory from my experience. I find it quite exhausting because my brain is usually already full at capacity, and so I don't really have room for another sort of script. The backpack thing. I've recently started doing this thing where I will just grab my backpack and I will pull things out of it and react to those things as I sing to try and create an emotional journey for the piece. This is not a product placement, by the way. I find that helpful because it kind of makes me do the emotion and do the thought naturally, as opposed to having to think about it. I just do it. Whether I can do that out like without the backpack is another question. That is partly also why I find singing in operas easier in many ways than singing in recitals or concerts, because I don't have to just stand there and only use my face. I can actually just run around and like talk to people and touch things and actually act. Whereas in a recital, like, it's so hard taking an aria, especially out of context. It is so hard. Another thing I have been doing that I hope will eventually be helpful is positive self-talk. Again, harder in practice than in theory. I'm very mean to myself a lot of the time. I overthink and I'm prone to like bitterness, jealousy, self-flagellation, all that kind of stuff. But again, it's that whole faking confidence thing. Eventually the fake confidence becomes real confidence. Again, fake confidence, I found that helpful in some ways, not helpful in other ways. Like, I personally, I don't want to pretend to be someone I'm not. I don't want to be loud and outgoing just for the sake of being loud and outgoing. I used to always get like told off and teased for looking down all the time and being quiet and reserved. And so I was very, very resistant to to changing that for a long time, because I was sick of people chastising me for it. Like, why should I fake extroversion if it's not who I am? At the moment, I'm working on just being confident as me and not as a fake person, as someone else. I also find it helpful when learning when learning a new piece or whatever, to relate it to things that I know and that I understand and that I feel. Like, for example, I had this song once. There was a line in it about the wind comes softly out of the south, like the fond words from a lover's mouth. At the time gave me a massive ick, because I wasn't really into romance, still kind of meh on the subject, but I couldn't relate, and so I related it instead to like a cat purring in my ear, and I was like, that's nice, that I can vibe with. So to finish off, things I've noticed, observations. So I've noticed that in pop music, rock music, basically most things that are not classical and music theatre, you can actually just be you and look weird and move weird, and nobody cares, because they're just like, oh, it's that person, they're just being them, it's great. An excellent example being Gerard Way. Yes, I have a Lego Gerard Way because I'm crazy. You'll see them just shaking all over, being completely unhinged, and everyone loves it, and it's great, but you can't really do that in a classical recital unless we make some kind of revolution where we can. I'd be down for that, not gonna lie. But that being said, Gerard has one of the most expressive faces I've ever seen, and I wish my face was that expressive. I do not know how he does it. You may have noticed that in my TikTok videos especially, I am quite poker-faced, and I think a lot of that is because I'm reading off a lyric sheet or a script that I've put together right then and there, and I'm not very prepared, so maybe just being prepared is the secret, I don't know. But also being slightly poker-faced and having slightly weird facials could be part of my charm, I don't know, but it, again, doesn't always go down well in a singing competition or a recital. And this might sound weird, but I've always not entirely liked the idea that the performer is not important. Like, yes, I get that sometimes you've got to surrender to the music and lose your inhibitions and not worry about what other people think of you. Sometimes you need to let go of your ego. That's a good thing. But I've never really liked the idea that if you're struggling on stage, if you're unhappy or in pain or unwell or something, you just have to suck it up, and no one cares. All they care about is the music. It's that whole, like, if you're going to die quietly, we don't care. I've never liked that. And like, sure, yes, I have done things like act through panic attacks and nobody noticed, and I was like, hell yeah, I did that. But also, I think there needs to be room for the performer to be important and to be, like, for their well-being to be important. Again, where's the line? I don't know where the line is. Like, I would love to be able to really unmask while I sing and really feel my feelings while I sing and really use singing as a catharsis. But that can be so hard, and also crying while you sing, it is so hard to sing while you cry. I've done it many times, and it absolutely wrecks how my voice sounds because all the muscles clench up, and I think it's a lot harder in classical because it's such a specific way of using your voice. The muscles all have to just do kind of the same thing all the time, as opposed to you having permission to grunt and growl and screech and all that jazz. Some people can do it particularly in rock. I've seen people do it, and I do not know how they do it. Teach me. I'm full of feelings, I'm full of anger, I'm full of lots of things, and I would love to learn to scream and do all that stuff, but it's not easy. That is pretty much the conclusion of my my ridiculous rant on stage performance and confidence and being a neuro-spicy bean in the classical singing industry. So I would love to hear your thoughts. What are your experiences? I'd love to hear from both neurodivergent and neurotypical people. How do you do it? Do you do it? I would absolutely love to hear your thoughts. So thank you for listening and putting up with my unhingedness. Happy birthday, sweaty boy. He is actually sweating. Don't forget to click subscribe, etc., etc. Bye!